Well, I could not be more excited to be talking to one of the most powerful voices in the climate movement. Christiana Figueres is a renowned leader on global climate change. She was the executive secretary, as almost everyone knows, of the UNFCCC, the Global Climate Negotiations, in 2015 that led to the Paris Agreement. She is a co-author of The Future We Choose. She is a founding partner of the organization Global Optimism, and she's co-host of the very popular podcast Outrage and Optimism. So I first met Christiana when I was a new minister. I'd been on the job for 3 days, and I was thrust into the Paris Agreement negotiations. I was a little more optimistic then, to be perfectly honest. A little more outraged now. So today we're going to talk to Christiana about what's going on in the global climate movement, where the best opportunities are for change, and how women are leading the way. Hello and welcome, Christiana. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Catherine. It's delightful to see you again. And as you were reminding me about the first time I saw you, it was just so thrilling because, yes, you were a new minister of a new government and you just walked into the negotiations. You picked up the microphone and you went, "Folks, Canada is back." And I went oh, how refreshing. How totally refreshing.
Well, that was a while ago. Gosh, that was a while ago. But so look, it's a hard time. And I think I like us all being honest about how we're feeling. So how are you feeling right now, given everything that's going on? We have an accelerating climate crisis. You may even have an incident to talk about, apparently. And at the same time, we've got some political headwinds.
Yeah, I do have something. I actually do publicly apologize for being exceedingly late to this recording because I am dealing with an overnight flood that I had here in my home because we're in the middle of the rainy season in Costa Rica and homes are built for normal rain pour, not for these incredible downpours that we are getting that are sometimes short but very intense and sometimes intense and long. So I have been over the past maybe year or two dealing with floods, and last night's was a new version of floods. So I've been dealing the whole day with, okay, now how do we deal with this one? So I apologize for being late, but yeah, whether it's floods or storms or droughts or fires, Catherine, there is not a single country that is exempt. And increasingly, I know more and more people who are either tragically affected or somewhat inconvenienced, as I would characterize myself, inconvenienced, but so terrible that we have more and more people who are tragically affected. There is no doubt that the impacts of climate change are escalating and possibly even escalating not linearly, but exponentially.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot. I think we just have to be real about that. But I want to go back to a very optimistic time. So I want to go back to the Paris Agreement. So I first met you and I was like, who is this awesome woman? She is so great. And I remember you kind of had this no BS attitude. You're strolling the halls, like people are partly, they're petrified of you because you're going to push them to actually negotiate properly and get an ambitious deal. But also you're so charming. So at the same time, they're like, all right, here she comes. And, you were great because it was hard getting an ambitious deal. I think people kind of talk about it like, oh, no big deal. We got a Paris Agreement. I think that it seemed to me we were going to get a Paris Agreement, whether or not it was going to be ambitious and set the stage.
That was the question.
So take us back to that time and why, because I think a lot of people now kind of take for granted the Paris Agreement, or even some people are like, it's over, Paris Agreement is dead. Remind us about that time and why the Paris Agreement was just so important.
Well, it was so important, or continues to be so important, because it is the legally binding framework that guides the decarbonization of the global economy over decades. different to the Kyoto Protocol, which was the legal instrument prior to the Paris Agreement that only had a span of 8 years, whereas the Paris Agreement is meant to go to at least mid-century. And so it is a long-term vision. And it is also important because the logic of it is a bottom-up logic, very different to the Kyoto Protocol that was a top-down. So the bottom-up means every country is invited to figure out for itself how much they can decarbonize and how they want to modernize and decarbonize and efficientize, if that's a word, their economy and their industry and their energy system, and then to report that on a regular basis into the convention. And then, of course, the hope, the expectation is that then the sum total will actually keep us on track to the decarbonization that we need of net zero by 2050. Now, the issue that we're having now is that the sum total of all of these efforts that countries are putting in according to their own enlightened self-interest is not coming up to tracking toward keeping us to net zero. Or the other way to think about it is, are we protecting the 1.5 degree ceiling, temperature ceiling that is established in Paris? So that is the question that we're facing. That is the anxiety that we face. Now, it's interesting because 10 years after Paris, everybody speaks about 1.5, sort of like I talk about the plants in my garden. I have beautiful bromeliads in my garden, and, I've always loved bromeliads. Well, no, it's not like we've always loved 1.5. No. It has become commonplace, and we definitely use it as a reference. But way back then, 10 years ago, 1.5 was not in the draft text at all. It was not in the draft text, and it was thanks to the advocacy and the brilliant political leadership of the South Pacific Islands, Tony de Broom, to use a specific name, that we were able finally to get 1.5 as an aspirational temperature ceiling into the Paris Agreement. But everything else refers to below 2 degrees. So that was a huge step forward to be able to insert the 1.5 degree, even if it was aspirational, to insert it in that way. Now, what I think is incredibly exciting is that the International Court of Justice has just come out maybe a month or 2 months ago with their advisory opinion. And in their opinion, there has now been so much national legislation in different countries about 1.5 that they deem it is no longer aspirational. It is now legally binding. That is unbelievable.
Amazing. Thank you, Tony de Broom.
Thank you, Tony de Broom. Thank you to the highest court in the world and all the judges who unanimously adopted this advisory opinion. But it also shows that while we get more and more frustrated with the fact that we're not on track, we also get more and more ambitious because the science is progressing, the attribution is progressing, the understanding of the impacts is progressing. So it's interesting that we have both that are actually on a curve up, both the impacts and the understanding of the science, hence the ambition and what we expect of ourselves now. So Paris Agreement is not dead at all. It is very alive and continues to evolve in its understanding and its application.
I totally agree. I mean, it's interesting because I'm doing the third version of the Net Zero report to the UN Secretary General. And in it, we talk about the first 10 years of the Paris Agreement, because it's a progression. It's not a document that ends after 10 years. Right. We have to keep on making progress. And if you look where we are now, without the Paris Agreement, we would have been tracking to like 4.5 degrees or more of warming. And now we're well under that. We're not at 1.5. We all know that. And we have some headwinds, but we've made a ton of progress. And I think, and we argue this in the report, that the fact that governments stepped up and they reflected in their legislation, but also with their policies, action, serious climate action, where everyone's doing their part, that actually sent a signal to the market. And we've now seen the market accelerate. So, you have Bill McKibben and so many others just talking about this massive revolution when it comes to solar, but so many of the other solutions. So and I think you agree, like my take on all this is, yeah, we still have a lot more work to do, but the Paris Agreement, the first 10 years were actually maybe not as successful as we wanted, but they've really set the stage, and now we got to keep on going. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk, you asked me, I remember maybe a year after the Paris Agreement, you asked me to write a profile of Paris, or, do a profile for your book. You've done many things. I only talked about a few of them in the bio, but you've done many different initiatives. And I reflected on what struck me the most about Paris beyond getting an ambitious agreement with a temperature goal where every country was going to do their part. And I was like, all these women, like these really kick-ass women that were digging deep. And it's funny because I didn't actually, I wasn't looking for it. I was just trying to help do whatever I could to negotiate, to help, get with the negotiations. But we had amazing women. Obviously we had you, but we had Laurence Toubiana, who was wearing her different colored Converse shoes, quietly walking the halls as France's climate ambassador. And we had Sharon Burrows, who was representing the trade unions. And we had Rachel Kite, who is the World Bank's kind of a climate ambassador, and we had Mary Robinson, and we had so many ministers from countries, women ministers from countries around the world, environmentalists, indigenous women, and I just thought it was really awesome. And so maybe talk to me about that, because you must have, you were, fully in the negotiations, but you must have also noticed that too, wow, here are some women that are pushing super hard, and I think it was Rachel Kite said, she was pushing hard because she saw the Paris Agreement as a mother. This is what she owed her kids and future generations. And, I don't want to generalize too much about women, but I do think that in the case of the Paris Agreement, we would not have had as an ambitious agreement and in such successful negotiations without women that were leading the way.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, the first time that it struck me that we had a very, I think, unusual and critical alliance of women was way back in 2011 at the Durban COP, because it so happened that we had a female COP president, we had a female head of the G77 and China, which is a very critical political group. We had a female executive secretary, myself, and we had a female head of security.
Wow. And
it was so interesting to me to see, and we had a female head negotiator for South Africa as well. And it was the first time in these climate negotiations since, I had just taken over in 2010, so it was just my second COP. First was in Mexico, but my second COP, I was really struck by every time that we got together for some strategic planning or whatever, it was women in the room. And I was really struck by the level of ambition that each brought individually, but collectively, whoa. I thought I was ambitious, and then another woman would take it, to the next level, and on and on and on and on. And I thought it was so fascinating, because that quintuplet of 5 women there directing that whole thing, it was a tight and awkward group. It was tight because we all wanted the same thing. It was awkward because we wanted to get there through different paths. And we all recognized, like you say, that there is something in us women that resonates with Mother Nature, that resonates with stewardship of life on this planet, that resonates with regeneration, with the creation of life. It is so deep, it's ancestral, right? We don't even have to name it, and sometimes you can't name it. But somehow there is this tsunami of interlinkages and alliances that comes forward when you're working along women, that you don't really have to intellectualize. You don't have to sort of pick out, well, why do we have this special magic? It's just there. And so it was very powerful for me in 2011. And then after that, I worked very closely with Mary Robinson to bring more and more women into the negotiations, into negotiating teams, certainly into the secretariat, and into decisions of the COP. And why? Because we tend to think more long term. We tend to think, it's a gross generalization, but we tend to think more long term than men. We tend to be more collaborative than competitive. We tend to be more mischievous, in the sense of, let's see how we can do this. Let's be innovative here. You know, what cute little ways can we find to get to where we want to go? And yeah, there's just, there must be a technical word for it, Catherine, but my technical word is magic. Okay, there is a magic that happens.
Totally. Awesome magic.
Awesome. There you
the
go.
Best ever. It's interesting, and it's probably you I have to give credit for, because they actually track women at negotiations, like how many of the negotiators are women, and then they did a study. So obviously we haven't hit the magic number of 50%, and it's brutal that some delegations have no women, or women just sitting on the sides, not negotiating. Canada's negotiating team, I will say, was a lot of women. Our lead negotiator was women, and we had a lot of women. But I thought it was funny that the UN Women tracks how long women speak versus men, and men speak 2 times as long. Probably to restate their position, not to move forward, not to generalize, but I did see that. Okay, so now I want to talk about like something that's been bugging me a lot. Fossil fuel companies. So I think you and I was Minister of Environment and Climate Change in Canada. I was like, okay, we're going to do a deal. We all got to be in this together. Clearly, we need to be working with fossil fuel companies and with provinces. And so I tried really hard. I tried so hard. And they said they were committed to net zero. They were committed to, reducing emissions by 2030. They were going to do all these things. And then they didn't. And then they fought everything. And then they gave their money back to shareholders. And I remember reading a piece that you wrote in July 2023. And I think you said, I thought fossil fuel firms could change. I was wrong. So unpack that moment for you when, you were like, I tried. I thought this was possible. So talk about this, because I think we do have to keep it real. Like, we have to actually, we all want to move forward. We've got solutions, but there are folks that are blocking us. Or blocking the world.
Yeah, that was really a very difficult article for me to write, because I just felt so disappointed. And honestly, I felt so betrayed.
Yeah. So
betrayed. But I wanted to be public about it. I very much believe in learning in public, and not learning, undercover. And so I wrote that article because after the invasion of Ukraine, which to me was the huge switch in intentionality of fossil fuel companies, they frankly just lost their anchor in moral and economic responsibility that they had. I do believe that they were sincere before that. I spent a lot of time with fossil fuel companies, with CEOs, with boards, et cetera, et cetera. So I spent a lot of time, and I really do believe that they were sincere at the time. But
under the leadership at the time, too.
Under the leadership at the time, thank you. And the leadership has changed, and the conditions have changed, and the economics has changed after the invasion of Ukraine, for all the reasons that have been widely discussed. And so that's when I saw them all, without any exception, just shifting back to be the, retrograde thinking companies, thinking and acting companies that they had been before. Now, what is fascinating to me is that since then, we've been observing their treatment of their capital. And as you say, they are paying their shareholders back. They are buying down their own debt. They are not investing in new exploration. That is fascinating to me. And if we remember that all oil fields have a 6 to 7% loss rate every year, they lose 6 to 7% of their resource, every single oil field, some of them more. And that's why they have to continue exploring, because they lose their resource, or at least they lose their viable, economically viable resource. If they want to continue drilling from that well, then it gets much more expensive. So in order to keep their viability, they have to continue exploring. What is fascinating to me is that they're not doing that. So my sense is that they do seem to have acknowledged that their expiration date is written on the wall, that they are trying to extend the expiration date as much as possible, but that they've basically accepted that will not benefit from business as usual eternal continuity. They just won't. So it's very interesting, because they're doing one thing with their capital, i.e. not investing it for the future, but speaking completely contrary, right? They continue to give out the messages that we're here to stay and we're here to solve poverty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of this that is not true.
Not true. I mean, in Canada, what we're seeing is we aren't seeing more. I don't think we're going to see new oil exploration, although natural gas and the LNG is the big hope here. So, I mean, the good news is we have these solutions. We've talked about it. I mean, the scaling of renewables, it's exponential, and storage and EVs. So that is sending a message. And we look at peak fossil fuels by 2030. The challenge is, of course, has to be faster. And in some cases, they're actually blocking renewables. And that's not even letting the market. I love that we're always talking about conservatives. They believe in the market, except when it's a market for some of them that they don't like, i.e. renewables. Okay, we're going to take a little break here for life. What do you do to get away from it all? Now, you're in one of my favorite countries, I have to say. I did my first trip to Costa Rica when I finally left politics. Sadly, I don't know why it didn't work out when I was in politics, but I was so busy trying to tackle climate change in Canada. But what do you do? I go swimming, open water swimming in particular, but if there isn't open water, it's freezing cold in Canada, I'll go in a pool. It's just to put my head down and put one arm in front of the other and maybe have a song in my head, or maybe think about nothing. That's how I get away from it all. What do you do? What's your advice for others? Because I think we got to get away from it sometimes. We can't just always be focused on climate action. And also, it's hard. Mentally, it's really tough.
Yeah, well, yes and no is my opinion about whether we have to get away from it. And this has been a journey for me over quite a few years, but currently where I am is I have not found it helpful to simply walk away from the pain. What I'm finding more helpful is actually to embrace the pain. Strange as that may seem. To embrace the pain, acknowledge, what is going on, the news, reels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the magic is, how do I turn that pain, because I am deeply pained by what we're doing to nature more than anything else. And the magic is, how do I turn that pain into my agency, into my determination, into my commitment? It's a little bit... Here's an example that I could give that maybe explains what I'm talking about. If we are standing... Oh, wow. All these horses running down the beach. Beautiful. Well, gorgeous horses. What can I say?
Now I really want to be in Costa Rica. I'm really jealous.
Horses galloping down the beach. If we're standing on the side of a road, Catherine, and we're standing there with children at our side, my own child, your child, children. And one of these children runs into the road, and we look to one side and we see a bus that is barreling down the road. Okay? That's the situation that we're in. We are standing on the side of the road. Our humanity is basically standing in the middle of the street, and we see climate disaster barreling down the road. Now, the question then for me is, so what do? Do I turn away? No. I run forward like hell and pick up that child and move to the other side, run to the other side. So that is what I'm really trying to figure out. How do I do that? Not in a literal sense, but in my daily life. How do I translate my panic, my fear, my suffering about this climate disaster that is barreling down on us? How do I translate that into more agency, into more commitment, into more effective work? Because honestly, that is our human reaction. It's not to turn our back onto the barreling bus. That's not our human reaction. I mean, there's, the amygdala plays games with us, but ultimately, at the bottom of humanity, we do want to make a better world for everyone else. So that's the piece that I'm chewing into. How do I do that? What is the transformation? It's sort of like an alchemy, if you will. What is that magical alchemy?
That's really interesting, because I guess, I think, I just have to, for a little bit, get a little bit of a break, even if it's just, going for a swim for half an hour. But that's really interesting that instead, just, do something that's kind of scary, which is acknowledge that we are where we are, and actually people are really suffering. And one of the other things is I think about this, because it's just a very different way of, looking at it. I guess we're all, every day faced with what's going on in the climate crisis and working much of the time. But it's also about building empathy, because as you say, if we're actually acknowledging what's happening around the world in these images, that they're affecting real people. And the more we can think about that, as opposed to where I think we're getting, what I worry now, and I see this in politics, is there seems to be a lot less empathy and solidarity. And I think we really need that, because if we're going to tackle this, sure, we have solutions, but that's not what's going to, you can have all the solutions you want, but you actually have to say, this is for future generations. This is for people at the other side of the world. This is for people that are poor and marginalized who are much less able to adapt, even though it's impacting on everyone. I'm gonna chew on that one, Christiana. I'm gonna chew on that. That's good.
When we think about this is about people on the other side of the world, yes and no. My sense about that is we're all in the same boat. There's one planet. We're all here. There's one atmosphere that distributes CO2 concentrations everywhere. So we're all in the same boat. So to argue that we have a hole in the boat, but it's only those who sit closest to the hole who are going to drown, is false. That's a myth. If there's a hole in the boat, we all drown. It's not just those that are closer to the hole.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely solidarity, and at the same time, understand that we don't do that out of magnanimous feelings for other people. It's because we understand that it is humanity itself that is actually under threat, including you and me.
Including you and me. I just hope, though, governments step up. One of the big things that will come up inevitably in Brazil is how are we going to support developing countries and actually put real dollars there? And we're seeing that, less and less governments who are wealthy are willing to do that. So, but I totally agree with you. This is a different way of thinking about things. So, Christiana, I always learn something from you.
Aw, thanks.
Also, I was like, I liked this, like, don't always be outraged, McKenna, be optimistic sometimes. I mean, I'm a realistic optimist or an optimistic realist, but sometimes I can get the Irish, like, outrage there. So, okay, so now let's talk about what you're working on, because you always have, like, new things you're working on and kind of, maybe not new theories of change, but, ways, how are you going to change things? And I think global optimism is really interesting. So for many folks might not know about global optimism, and if you're in the climate world, I'm sure you do directly in the international side, but talk about the theory of change of global optimism.
So, Global Optimism is a purpose-led company and NGO. We're both. And our theory of change is that if we take doom and gloom as our only possible reality, we have no capacity to create anything other than doom and gloom. So we say, yes, there is pain. Yes, there is malfunction, terrible malfunction in the system. And at the same time, what do we do about it? What can we do about it? What more can we do about it? So it really is about keeping an open heart and an open mind for innovation, for possibility, also for discovering and recognizing how much is being done. The fact that we have a new economy rising, as you pointed out in the beginning, right, with all these new technologies that are coming forward and taking over the market, that's a new economy that is rising. It is rising slowly, but it is definitely rising, and it's not going back to fossil fuel age. So we are always on the lookout for more and more proofs of the fact that we can pull the future into the present. And what can we do in the present to actually accelerate that future? That is what we work on, and we work on it through partnerships with Amazon, for example, for the Climate Pledge, where we have almost 600 companies that have pledged to reach net zero, not by 2050, as the Paris Agreement says, but by 2040, 10 years early. We have, our podcast, Outrage and Optimism, that seeks to educate people and bring them up to date with what is happening in the climate world and all the adjacent fields. We have something called Groundswell, which is an effort to change the narrative, because still the predominant narrative is doom and gloom. And we don't think that's helpful. It's not helpful to get us to where we need to go. So we have partnerships there with about 60 different organizations to change the narrative to something that is more inspiring and more enabling of what we want to do. And finally, we host retreats for climate activists, climate leaders, biodiversity protectors, ocean people who are overwhelmed, who feel that it's all too much, who feel I've been working in this my whole life, or I've been working at it 2 years, and I just can't take it anymore because I don't see any progress. And so we host retreats around the world to support all of those people to not give up, not burn out, but rather to find their own agency, their own spark again, and go back at it. Because honestly, we can't afford to lose one person in this field, not a one. So we're there with a very broad net of support for people who have the conviction that we share the conviction, but are feeling somewhat challenged, weakened, threatened, and we brush them off and invite them to go back into work.
That is amazing. Because I think we need that. Like, I think people need to be, given a bit of space and be with others that share their concerns and fears. But then we got to bolster them back. We need everyone to be engaged.
Yeah.
So one thing you talked about, and you talk about a lot, is communications. And I think this is something I became obsessed. I mean, I'm a former lawyer, so that really took a long time to get the legal jargon out of me. But and still, it's hard. The climate world is like there's a million different acronyms all the time. Like even COP. I remember asking about a COP. My first question was like, okay, what's a COP? And then they said Conference of the Parties. I was like, that was the worst ever. Like, what acronym is not even helpful? But comms, like communications, is really important, and I think that you've talked about like often people working in the climate world, on the solutions or just in the international negotiations, they use jargon, and it's very complicated. So how do we talk, like I would say this all the time, like how do we talk like real people talk to real people? So what's your advice? Because I think you think about this a lot, and you're a pretty plain talker, which I love.
Yeah. And honestly, it's one of our commitments in the podcast is precisely to not do that, because then you alienate most people. So because we co-host with Tom Carnac, Paul Dickinson, and myself,
It's a great podcast if you haven't listened.
it's
I
very
wish I had
fun.
my episode number because I am on, but all the episodes
Yes,
are
yes,
awesome.
you do.
It's great.
But I'll look it up and tell
It's okay.
listeners
It's
which one
okay.
it
There are
is.
many awesome episodes.
But yeah, we really keep on each other's toes not to do that, not to use jargon, not to use acronyms. In fact, one of the first, I think it was the first, or one of the first episodes we did this year is we went through a whole bunch of acronyms that would be relevant to the year 2025. And we went through and, demystified them and what do they all mean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because as you say, we tend to create and collect acronyms, as though as though there were no end to them. And there is no end to them because we continue. Sometimes I think the climate community creates acronyms just to tell who is in the know and who is not in the know anytime. Are you up to date with all the scoop or not? It's just really pathetic, and especially
Pathetic. I
anything-
like it. It is pathetic. I didn't even
It
know what
is
was going on.
pathetic.
I started as a minister. I was like, what is anyone talking about? It actually, and I was someone who was studying hard, but I was like, I couldn't even figure out what was going on half the time. So that is good. It is pathetic. We got to stop it.
Yeah, and so we really do that. We're really committed to that in the podcast to not do that. And it definitely is one of my suggestions for all of us who work in anything to do with global environment, or in fact any subject, is not to assume that that people know your jargon. But every time that you use an acronym, stop. Explain the jargon, explain the acronym. When you use a word that is sort of techie and, nerdy in your field, stop, explain it. Because otherwise, honestly, it's a lack of respect for everyone who's listening.
Yeah. And
That's
I think
what I
it's
think
just, it is hard. Like, also, I mean, I'm not sure it motivates people. Even sometimes when we have these concepts and we're unpackaging them and trying to explain them to people, I think like people are, as they say in politics, which isn't a great thing all the time, but when you're explaining, you're losing. I mean, I don't think that we can't dumb it down completely, but I think also speaking to what motivates people, whether it's, the kids you love or having clean air or clean water, especially when we're talking to the public, because I think otherwise they're like, they don't care about the things I care about. And that's not true. I don't believe that for the climate world. I think we just get caught up and start talking like we're just talking to each other, and other people either don't matter or they're kind of listening in and maybe they could figure it out.
I just looked up, Catherine, you are our episode number 17.
Oh, well, there you
Which
go.
means we had you a long time ago because we've just released episode 311.
Whoa! Holy
Yeah,
Moses!
amazing.
Holy Moses! Okay,
So you are 17.
if I'm on a deserted island and I'm left there, I'm just gonna listen to all these episodes. Like I just
yeah,
got.
or the one with yourself. How's that?
Definitely won't. I hate listening to myself. Oh my! It's funny. I'm doing a podcast. I can't stand my voice. My staff members, when I was in politics, they would be like, "You have to listen," and I was like, "No, I sound so terrible." So I haven't gotten out of that. So I won't listen to myself, but I'll listen to the others.
Okay.
Okay, so we're getting to the end of this, and I just want to, so we got to motivate folks. So you've talked a lot about things that you're working on, but for women, or people, men, or however you identify, it doesn't matter. But if you're trying to make change, what is your advice right now? And then specifically talking to the women leading on climate community, what do we need to do? Like, this is a moment we gotta, I think we're gonna have to dig pretty deep, because it's not the easiest moment given everything that's going on in the world and an accelerating climate crisis. So what's your advice?
Well, that's a big question. So let's see if I can have at least a little answer for a big question. What to do? I think first of all is to not accept that anything that we see now is immutable and unchangeable. Mm-hmm. Everything that we experience is changeable, and we can create a future that we want if we dedicate ourselves to. So that's first. Secondly, and that's a mindset thing, right?
Yep.
That's a mindset. Secondly is to really reach out with our feelers to those who are on a similar journey, so that we don't feel alienated and isolated, but we realize we're actually part of what I call a human mycelium. And we're all one tiny little node in that human mycelium. There are hundreds, thousands, millions of people around the world that are on the same mission as you and I. Just because we've never met them doesn't mean they don't exist. There is a human mycelium that is operating here across the entire world, of people nudging the system in the direction that we want. So the first is to be conscious that change is possible if we devote ourselves to it. And secondly, to know that we're not doing this alone.
Yeah.
That there is a lot there's the team. The team is a huge team.
Yeah, and that's what I think. I actually think sometimes when I look at the United States and I talk to folks and they're like, it's really hard. And I said, get out on the streets or be with people. Know that there are other people, that you're not just sitting online, doom scrolling and looking at these terrible things happening. We can make change. And there's a massive number of people who care and believe in a better future. So I'm totally with you on that. Now, I wish I was hanging out with you. So I was like, oh gosh, I'd like to actually be, normally I say, if you're in my living room, come to my living room and we'll hang out. But I'm going to imagine I'm in your living room. You got a little water, so that's okay. We're looking at the horses going by in the beach, and you're putting on some music. What song do you want to put on right now that we can play at the end of this podcast?
Well, it's not a song, it's a composition.
Oh, okay.
And it is The Four Seasons by Vivaldi.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, we're going to play it super loud, and we're going to have a glass of wine and lots of laughs. Anyway, wonderful. You're the best, Christiana. It's so nice seeing you, and I can't even believe that it's 10 years. 10 years since we first met. Holy moly. We still look great. Anyway, thanks a lot, Christiana. Just keep on out with the Outrage and Optimism. Oh, you're welcome.
Love you. Big
hug
to you.